Hello! Today we're going to be reading a selection from the Complete Tales of Beatrix Potter's Peter Rabbit. Now, in this particular book, there's multiple different stories from Peter Rabbit's life. There's the tale of Peter Rabbit, the tale of Benjamin Bunny, the tale of Mr. Todd, and the tale of Flopsy Bunnies. But those will be for later videos. Today we're going to read the tale of Peter Rabbit. I'm going to sit a little closer so that you can see the pictures. Now, once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. There's their mother, and there's their house where they live, right underneath the fir tree there. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor." So there they are getting ready and they're putting on their jackets. "Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. There goes Mrs. Rabbit. She's going through the woods looking for groceries and picking up some things for Peter and Cottontail and Mopsy and Flopsy. Now, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. Right there. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away into Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. There he is eating. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. There he goes. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? There he is, right there. Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, and he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. There's his little shoe right there. It's amongst the cabbages, and it fell off his foot when he was running. Now, after losing them, he went on all 4 legs, and went faster, so that I think he might have gotten away altogether, if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net, and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. There he is, he got tangled up in that netting. These brass buttons got caught. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears. But his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. That means to try really hard to get out of the net. So Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him. Oh no, he lost his jacket. And then he rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Oh no, he's wet. There he is climbing into the can. See? Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. Achoo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and tried to put his foot upon Peter, but he jumped out of the window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. There's Peter escaping out of the small window of Mr. McGregor's tool shed. He's jumping up. Look at that. Now, Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall. There's the door in the wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her a way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Here he is asking the mouse for help. Right there. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still. But now and then the tip of her tail twitched, as if it were alive. Peter thought it would be best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. And we'll learn about Benjamin Bunny in a later story, about the story of Benjamin Bunny. Now, Peter went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Screech, scratch, scritch, scratch, scritch. Peter scuttled underneath the bushes. But presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing his onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. All right, now look, this is important right here. There's Peter Rabbit sitting up there, and you can see Mr. McGregor, he's hoeing the onions right there. And way back here, right across the field, is the gate. That's where Peter's got to get to. So there's the gate. Peter got down very quietly from the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. There goes Mr. McGregor chasing after Peter. See, Peter's slipping right out underneath the gate there. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and shoes for a scarecrow to frighten away the blackbirds. So Mr. McGregor found Peter's clothes and he hung it up to make a scarecrow to keep the birds away from his garden. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was a second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. That means 2 weeks. So he lost 2 sets of clothes in 2 weeks. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made him some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime, Mrs. Rabbit said. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. See, look, so here's Peter's mother. She's making the chamomile tea there, and Peter's way back here asleep in the bed. And then here's Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, and they're having their bread and their milk because they were good rabbits and they listened to their mother. So that's the end of that story. Now, I really like Peter Rabbit, but boy, he sure is a naughty rabbit. But, so next time, we can hear about the tale of Benjamin Bunny. That's what's next, so we'll learn about Peter Rabbit's cousin and the adventures that he has. And then after that, we'll hear about the tale of Mr. Todd and the tale of Flopsy Bunnies. So I'll see you next time.